Hey everyone, I am so excited to do another podcast interview, and I'm so pleased to welcome H.E. Bauman on the podcast. So, H.E. Bauman is the author of four fantasy novels with more on the way. An avid writer since elementary school, her dream of authorship became a reality when she published Under Darkened Skies in 2023. When she's not writing, you can find her playing tennis, immersed in a video game, or spending time with her family. So, welcome.
Hi, Julie. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. I came across you on Instagram not long ago. I think it was around the time you released Under Darkened Skies. And I was just so
Yeah,
intrigued by
maybe.
like the
I don't know.
cover and
Instagram's a mess.
yeah, we can do like a whole episode just talking about
Yeah,
Instagram.
I'll stop myself from going on that rant.
Um, but yeah, like I was just so drawn to your cover and just the tropes and just you talking about your book. And I just got really excited to want to talk to you more about it.
Thank you. It's good to know that what I'm putting out there is resonating.
Of course, yeah. I think that like we all had, I mean, we were told to write what we want to write, and then there's going to be readers out there who will want to read it and just trusting that. And
100%.
so that's great.
Yeah, but you still feel like you're shouting into the void just a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, it does feel that way. Oh, darn marketing and
Yeah,
Instagram.
gosh.
All right, well, I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more. So tell us when writing started for you and what your journey's been like.
Well, like in my bio said, I've been writing since like elementary school, very early age. I don't even remember a lot of it, to be honest. But I would always finish my work early, even in like first grade. They would give me more workbooks to go through. I'd go through those. I read all the books in the class library. So my teachers were like, well, why don't you write your own stories? They were trying to keep me busy throughout the day, and it worked. Because, I was a voracious reader, but writing took on a magic of its own. And really, ever since then, I just keep telling stories. And, like a lot of people, I've had periods in my life where I've fallen off that wagon, but I got back on after grad school and just haven't left since.
That's amazing. And were you getting
Yeah.
inspired to write from the books that you were reading? And you were just like, I can do
Oh,
this
very
too.
much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. I've always loved fantasy books. So my parents actually saved a lot of my notebooks from when I was in like second grade, third grade, all the stories I would print out from the family computer as I got older. And I was reading through some of them last year, and it was so funny because it was like I basically was taking all the tropes I liked from fantasy books and just like mishmashing them into some kind of mess that like a 10-year-old would make. Um, but we're still all doing that, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was just thinking. I'm like, do we still do that? We just mashing tropes together all the time.
Yeah, yeah, right. Before I even knew what a trope was, I was identifying them and doing it. So
You're born to be a writer. You naturally knew what to do.
apparently, and that must be the sign, right?
Yeah, that's amazing that your parents have kept your stories. I wrote a lot in elementary school as well, and I would like make those little books out of like copy paper,
Yeah.
and I would like draw
Yep.
and write. Yeah, and I made
Oh,
so
yes.
many of those, but they're just all thrown away now. I wish I kept them. So that's amazing
Yeah, lost
that
to
your parents
time.
did that.
Yeah, they only have maybe, like 5 or 10 of them out of I'm sure I've had many more.
Hmm.
But it's cool to be able to go back and be like, wow, I was really doing this at like 10 years old.
That's amazing. And did you continue
Yeah.
writing through like middle school, high school, college, if you went to college?
Yeah, I did. College is kind of in high school is where I fell off a little bit, just because I took really heavy course loads of like AP work. And then
Hmm.
in college, I'm very much an overachiever and a try hard. So I was taking, 3 more classes and was normal for a semester and all this stuff because I wanted to finish early. So I didn't really just have the time or the energy for creative writing, but I would still, read fiction that was coming out. I would read a lot of fan fiction that I was into, and I kept my, foot in creative writing, just didn't have as
Hmm.
much time for it for
Yeah.
a handful of years.
Yeah, that totally makes sense and it's very relatable.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like don't have the time to do that creative stuff. And then
Yeah, I feel
what
like a lot of oh, sorry, not
okay,
to cut you
no,
off. I
go
was going to
ahead.
say I feel like a lot of writers I've become friends with, we all have a similar trajectory in that way of like there's a period where we're really into writing and then something happens where we fall off and then we've all rediscovered it.
Right.
Um, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's so relatable. And it's fun when you get
Yeah.
back into that groove of writing again. You realize, oh, wow, this is
Yeah.
something that I loved and I get to do it again. So, can you
Yeah. It
tell
was
us?
hard at first.
Yeah, I'm sure it can be a little bit hard. Like, I know, like, at least my
Yeah.
experience, I don't think I had ever written a full novel. Like I'd written like short
Yeah.
stories, but not a full novel. And so when I like picked up writing again, I was nervous that, oh, it's probably going to be another failed project. But then when I
Yeah.
proved myself that I did it, I was like, maybe I can do this some more.
Yeah. You finish one novel and you're like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah. It's like a confidence
Yeah.
boosting thing.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it never sees the light of day.
Yes, even if it never sees the light of day, which that novel is not.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good
Yeah, I have
practice.
I have those too.
So, tell us a bit about when you started writing Under Darkened Skies and like talking about practice novels,
Yeah.
like how many practice novels did you write before writing Under Darkened Skies?
I wrote a lot of practice novels between like middle school and early college that either I would halfway finish or completely finish, and they just, they were never something I was going to publish. And then Under Darkened Skies, speaking of things that will never see the light of day, I started in 2018. I didn't publish the book until 2023. Um, which is not abnormal, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a project can take years, but I actually wrote and scrapped. I don't remember if it was 3 or 4 full different first drafts of this book with the same characters, but very different like storylines and character personalities. Um, before I settled on the current version, and I was trying to take a lot of popular market tropes right now, like enemies to lovers, and you know, like true enemies to lovers, not like, oh, they disagreed and now they like each other again, but like full of betrayals and backstabbing and all this stuff.
Yeah.
um I was trying to do a lot with that, which I enjoy as a reader. I'm not like knocking it, and I want to make that very clear to everyone who's listening. I have no issue with those tropes. I enjoy them as a reader, but I was trying to kind of like fit a square peg into a round hole. It wasn't working and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. So I took a step back in the summer of 2021 and I kind of dissected my most recent draft of it. And I was like, what do I not like in here? What am I not connecting with? So I completely changed the male main character. His name's Verigen. Completely changed him. He went from being a not very nice guy to what I have called a deadly cinnamon roll. If you have seen my Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
meaning, he will do what needs to be done, but he also is like a really soft guy on the inside. And that changed everything. I changed it from multi-perspective to single perspective through the female main character. Her name's Estrella. Because it was really her story that I wanted to tell. But I was trying to fit into the popular, like make it multi-perspective and all this stuff. Which again, I like as a reader. And my next series that I'm actually working on already, I'm doing that and it's working. But for this book, it just wasn't. So it took me several years and many drafts to figure that out. But we're here now.
Yeah. And I think it's amazing that like you were able to like come to terms with being okay that your story, like the popular tropes that were happening at the time and still are happening. I mean, enemies to
Still
lovers
are.
is like still thriving, but like that are not working in your story and you're like, okay, this isn't working. What can I do to make it work? And then being okay with going a different direction with the male main character and switching from multi POV to single. So I think that's great that you're able to just be like, that's okay. That it's not fitting in with what is
Yeah.
popular, I guess.
Yeah. And it's tough because you write four drafts at 100,000 words each, 400,000 words,
Right?
basically that became useless to an extent. But
Yeah.
the way I've always felt about it, though, is like, I don't think that was a waste of my time. I had to go through that process to figure out these characters and what I wanted the story to be, which I think is just as important as what your ideal reader is going to want it to be. And I am my own first ideal reader. I write what I really like to read.
Yeah.
And when I honored that and actually went that direction, I finished my new first draft in like 2 months. And it was messy. It went through a lot of edits, but I really, really liked it. And the process was a lot easier. And that's when I was like, okay, I know I'm onto something now.
That is a great advice. Like to anyone listening who's a writer, aspiring author, that is just great advice to just, it's going to take a long time. But then once you find out
Yeah.
exactly what's working, then it is easier. So that's really great.
Yeah, and all the books that have come after it in the series, they were much easier and they did not go through like 17 different first drafts to get them to the place I
Yeah.
wanted them to be, right? The process shrank because I was so solid in the direction the story and characters were going. So it made
Yeah.
it a lot quicker and easier.
Yeah. That's so relatable. I think that like a lot of people say like, oh, the second book, like the sequel is the hardest one, which in a way I can see. But then if you're working with a sequel,
Yeah.
then you've already established the world and the characters. So yeah, in a way it is easier to write
Yeah.
the following books.
To me, it becomes so much more natural once I've
Yeah.
got the first book kind of solid. Um, then I really know what I'm doing. So that makes it a lot easier.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. So what made you decide to go the indie route with Under Darkened Skies?
Yeah, so I actually, gosh, when was it? Like 2009, 2010 was when indie publishing I don't think it was as mainstream and accepted as it was now. But I was like a junior in high school or something at that point. And I stumbled across the idea of self-publishing and KDP, which is Amazon's publishing platform. And I was by no means ready to publish a book, nothing like that. But I thought it was so interesting that this new part of the industry was developing that I knew I wanted to get into it at some point. I didn't know when that would be, but I had always wanted to be a novelist. And so I just kind of kept watching it and seeing what was happening and um, seeing the way indie authors were able to kind of take control of their own destiny to an extent, right? Where they could write a story that's maybe not as much to market like my book is, or they could, build their own dedicated fan base on a very niche concept, and make careers out of it. I thought that was really cool and very inspiring. So when I was satisfied where Under Darkened Skies was after the many rewrites, it wasn't even really a question for me. I was like, yeah, I want to do it this way. And that was that.
Yeah, it resonated with you, all of the pros
Yeah.
of going
Yeah.
indie. Yeah. And do you
Yeah.
naturally
And
like
there's
to,
always cons, but
yeah, of course, there's always cons. But willing to do
yeah,
the cons for the pros and such.
100%.
Yes. And are you
Yeah.
naturally someone who is like has an entrepreneur like mindset? Like you want to own your own business and be in control of your audience in the sense of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, very much so. I've always just felt that pull, even like when I was, a junior in high school. I always thought how cool it would be to not, be beholden to some corporate entity. Which, they certainly have their place. I'm not knocking trad
Yeah.
publishing at all. Maybe someday I'll go into it with a different series. But I have always felt that drive of like, I really enjoy doing things myself and getting my hands into the projects and um, being involved in all the different aspects of it. So it felt like a really natural fit.
Yeah. That's definitely probably my favorite part of indie is being so involved and having being the one who decides my editor and what the cover looks like and
Yeah.
yeah, and then just the direction
Yeah.
of your story. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And I've met so many amazing people going indie. I think that's one of my favorite parts of it. Like my editor is amazing, my beta readers, my alpha readers, my street team, just all my readers in general who have reached out to me, all the other authors. Everyone's so supportive in the indie
Hmm.
space. And they're really like in it for the long haul, right? Which is pretty cool that you can have colleagues that way in what would be an otherwise kind of isolated industry, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's one perk to social media where we
Yeah,
find
right,
those
exactly.
people.
One of them. If you can beat the algorithm and find them.
Yeah. But yeah, it is it's
Yeah,
so fun meeting authors and other beta readers and such that way, and the indie
yeah,
community is it's a very supportive, good community.
yeah. But yeah, everyone wants everyone else to succeed. So you really can't beat that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. All right. Well, let's talk about your book, Under Darkened Skies. Can you give us a
Oh
brief
gosh.
I
Is
know
it the
that's
hard
your
part?
should I even say the word pitch? um
See, and that's where it becomes like intimidating, right? What's the
yeah.
pitch? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Maybe I should reword that instead of saying give a brief pitch and I just be like, just tell us what it's about. But that might be intimidating too. So,
No, that's okay. I can do it. I just, we'll stumble my way through it. I'm not that succinct. So Under Darkened Skies, it's the first book in my romantic epic fantasy series, and I always say that it has a cozy twist. Because the story, it's it's kind of a more like lush series, right? There's a heavy focus on character relationships, not just plot. And I don't mean just the romance, like found family is very important in my story. So the pacing's not going to be the quickest in the world, and that was by choice. And some readers do like it, and some don't, and that's fine. But I like to warn everyone that it's not going to be some breakneck speed adventure until you get to the end. Then things kind of go off the rails, but I won't get into that. So anyway, Under Darkened Skies is about a 24-year-old healer and empath mage named Estrella, and she is tasked by the emperor where she lives to help his son, who is her former best friend, set up this big project for like this diplomatic summit that's going to happen in a few months. And she hasn't seen the son, Verigen, in 8 years because he got sent to war. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of unresolved feelings and tension there. um, but as they get like into this project that they're supposed to do, they figure out that someone is actually stalking Estrella and knows about her magic that she's been keeping a secret for a very long time. Um, and everything just kind of goes from there. It's this deadly conspiracy that spans not just like the country they live in, but the whole continent. There's multiple villains and different factions throughout the series. It gets pretty complicated, but it's fun. Uh, yeah, I
that's
don't know if that was a good pitch, but there it
yeah,
is.
that was great. And I love that you talked about like the expectation of this is going to be a slower read because you're focusing on the characters and the relationships.
Yeah.
And I like that it's not just romance. Like I like the found family aspect as well. Um,
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is important to me just as a person, right? I'm married, I've been with my husband for a long time, but you can't discount to like my friendships are so important to me, my family's so important to me, and I wanted to highlight that even in
mhm.
like a fantasy romance series of how important that is and how we need people and we need each other.
I love that. And I think that's probably one
Yeah.
of the biggest things that readers, when they go into reading a book, is those relationships and characters. Even if it's not
Yeah.
a romance, they are drawn to how characters interact with each other and whether it's a good relationship or bad relationship. I think that that's what keeps us reading.
Yeah, and it's the human aspect of it all, right? Like the
Yeah.
plot can be very exciting with the murders and the war and the conspiracies and the prophecies. But it's really like it's the characters that keep you drawn in, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So what was your inspiration for the setting? Because you describe it as like a kind of 1920s vibes in a fantasy world
Yeah.
and all it's kind of mysterious and so
Yeah, I grew up with reading authors like Tamora Pierce was very big for me when I was in middle school. I must have read her books like a dozen times. I think I was the only kid who ever checked them out from the library at school. But I grew up reading, like medieval-esque fantasy, which I still love.
Mhm.
But I was like, I just wondered like what happens when you combine like magic and like World War I technology, essentially. what does that look like and how does it change kind of like the plot and the fight scenes and the stakes, right?
Hmm.
Because yeah, you have people with very powerful magic, but then you have people with very powerful weapons too, which isn't it's not really a big part of the first book, Under Darkened Skies. But as you get deeper into the series, it's, continental war and all this different stuff that happens. Um, and so I was like, I'm just gonna go for it and see what happens when I do a post-industrial fantasy world. And it's been very cool. The vibes are fun, the aesthetic is fun. But then there's that added layer of danger in later in the series.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that time period. I think it's just there's something about it. It's just fun and different. It's like reading something that we know it's was from our
Yeah,
history, but we're not experiencing it now anymore. So yeah, I love that vibe. And
right.
then yeah, and then the focusing on like the World War I, like getting inspiration from that, and that there's lots of politics, there's a war. So was there like a lot of research you had to do into like was there like
Um,
parallels you drew from World War I or not really?
not really, not really. But I do love history. So just like for fun, I listen to a lot of podcasts about history. Or like back when I started writing the first draft of this book, I was listening to a 78 episode podcast about the Russian Revolution.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was like very like in deep with that. I don't know that it really influenced what I was doing, but
Mhm.
in terms of like storyline, but I do think in terms of, thinking about like, oh, right, like that kind of technology, right? Those overlapped a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, but but yeah, I mean, there's plenty I've researched about the tech, about the time period, just to make sure nothing is totally
Mhm.
out of left field. But it is a complete fantasy world. Like there's no true parallels to Earth.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
but I've researched all kinds of stuff. Airship coolant,
The weird
um,
things we research as writers.
the really specific stuff. When were potato peelers invented? Like I've gone down some rabbit holes.
That's great. And what made you
Um,
want to have the plot? I know you focus a lot on the characters and their relationships. So what
yeah.
made you want to have the plot be more political?
Well, in high school at one point, I thought I might become a lawyer because I'm always very interested in politics and what's happening. I'm not the person to be a lawyer arguing in a courtroom. I'm very sensitive. But like intellectually, it's very interesting. And one of my majors in college was actually international affairs with a focus in political science. So I've just always been interested in it. So I like you know, the stakes of the different factions fighting each other, infighting within the factions. My series is solo perspective, so you only get Shreya's point of view. So there's a lot you don't get to see, right? She can't be in every room all the time with even her enemies.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just fun knowing like what's happening behind the scenes that readers don't get to see, and then how that actually plays out for the characters. Um, yeah, I don't know. I like
Yeah.
it complex. I always text my friends and I'm like, why did I do this to myself when I'm drafting?
Yeah.
But the end result is great.
You have no idea like how relatable that is. I'm like, why am I
Yeah.
doing this?
Why did I make six factions again? I don't know. It's realistic though.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool that you
Yeah.
drew from like that knowledge of what you studied and that background you've got into this
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Hmm. And then you have the magic in it as well. So,
Ooh, yes,
what was
elemental magic, a
what
classic.
was your like inspiration? I mean, with it being elemental magic, I mean, there's so many things with elemental magic, but like, what
Yeah.
was like your inspiration for wanting to set up this magic?
Yeah, I'm a millennial. I'm a 90s kid. I loved Avatar: The Last Airbender
Oh
when it came out on
yeah.
TV when I was like, I don't know, I think I was 10 when it started airing. Um, I loved that show, and that was kind of my first real introduction to the idea of elemental magic. And then, there's all kinds of books and whatnot that I read later that included it. And it just felt like a natural magic system for me to dive into for this series, but I wanted to change it up just a little bit. So, you have earth, air, fire, and water, of course, the four base ones. But then I also added like celestial, like starlight magic, and then void magic, which is like shadow magic, just to give myself more room to play.
Hmm.
And then my main character, actually, Estrella, she's not a fighter. You guys, she's not a fighter. She, as I said earlier, is a healer and an empath. And I decided that I wanted to do that because just like I wondered what would happen if the hero had to be in like a post-industrial world and battle that technology. Um, I'm a gamer and I have been for a very long time, and I always play healer class characters, so like priests and druids and paladins and all that. And I was like, what if you take someone who is like the chosen one, used very loosely? If you've read the series, you know why I say that. And you make her not a fighter and you make her a healer who just wants to help people. What does that look like?
Hmm.
So that's been really fun to explore kind of that difference. She's not the warrior. She's not the like stubborn badass who's going to go and do everything on her own and kick ass and take names. She learns to fight, and she learns a lot about herself and what she can do. But at her core, she has stayed a healer.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
And those female warrior characters, they're like super
I love
overrated.
them. I grew up on
Oh
them.
yeah, I love them. But like we see them all the time, so it's kind of refreshing to
Yeah.
see a different character who's not a fighter. And there's almost in a way it almost makes her like more interesting. But maybe that's just me.
I like to think so. And I think it's important, right, to show kind of different kinds of strength that we all have.
Mm-hmm.
She's very emotionally intelligent. She's very inquisitive. She's very sensitive. I mean, she is literally a magical empath, so she kind of has an advantage with that. But just showing like you don't have to be, the stabby warrior archetype to help save the world.
Yeah,
It takes all kinds of people to do it and working together to do it.
I love that. I really like that. And then you
You
have a kind of like tell me if I'm wrong, a murder mystery kind of woven in. Kind of a
kind of. I don't want people to think it's going to be like a whodunit murder
yeah.
mystery. I did not go that route. But one of the key plot points in Under Darkened Skies is that, yeah, Estrella and Verigen are like navigating their reignited friendship and being forced to work together. It's very forced proximity. She does not want anything to do with him at the start. But there's this these background murders that are happening, that
Hmm.
are going completely unsolved, which everyone's like, well, it's kind of weird, but it's not really our business. Until Estrella is targeted by this stalker who seems to be connected to the murders. And so they're like, well, why is this person murdering random people and targeting you? Like, none of it makes any sense. And they start to connect the dots. But of course, it's the first book in a 5-book series. So
Yeah,
there's some things that are not answered until later. And that's on purpose. Uh,
gotcha. That makes
yeah.
sense.
So it's definitely not like a detective whodunit type thing.
Right.
But it is are these murders happening? Why are you being targeted by the people
Yeah.
doing them?
And
Yeah.
and of course, like you said, it's the way to get these two characters to be working together when they don't want to work together. Gotta
Exactly.
love
Right.
that.
Because it starts with the political, diplomatic
Yeah.
assignment, and turns into like, well, I'm gonna protect you and save your life. Verigen, he's doing that.
Hmm.
Because again, she's not a fighter. He has 8 years of military experience, and he's a fire mage. So he's certainly the guy to help her if anyone's going to.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And they definitely don't fall in love in the process.
I mean, we got it. This is a 5-book series, so
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Gotta bring in the slow burn.
It's a slow burn. I mean, it starts to really burn at the end of the book, and in book 2, it's not that slow of a burn.
Got it.
Um, but it's, you have to invest the time to get the payoff. I think that
Yeah.
I enjoy that as a reader.
Yeah, same here. So, what was your favorite and what were your favorite parts of writing this book? And what were some of the most difficult?
Gosh, one of my favorite things. It wasn't really in writing the book. It's what's come after. I don't know if that still counts.
Yeah, that totally counts.
Um, Okay, so we were talking about Estrella is this softer character, this more sensitive character. Um, so that's been different, but I also gave her like sensory processing issues. So the way her magic works is as an empath, right? It comes across her her three of her five senses. So like taste, touch, and then vision, like she sees auras as well. Um, but she has like sensory issues outside of that. So she, won't eat certain foods because she doesn't like the texture, or she has to wear specific clothes to like accommodate herself. Um, and her friends and her chosen family are just like, cool, we'll accommodate you too, which was important to me because I've had those issues my whole life and I never saw a character have them.
Mm.
And disclaimer, no, I'm not Estrella, we're not that similar, but I gave her, certain things about myself that I never saw in fiction. And what's been so cool is with her sensitive nature combined with those sensory problems. I've had so many people reach out to me or leave in their reviews like, I felt really seen by this character. She's a comfort character for me. Like, I really resonate with her. I've never met a character like this before. And that was so rewarding, right? Because that was what I really hoped was that people would see themselves. Like, I wanted to see parts of myself. And I even had one reader, she adopted a new cat and named her after Estrella. And I was like, oh my God, that's like the
That's
highest
so
honor you could give
sweet.
me. I know. I was like tearing up when I read that DM. Um, it's just so nice to be able to see that impact that your work has, even if you're not like a bestseller or anything, right? Like you can still reach people
Yeah,
and touch people in a way that is very positive, which has been just the coolest thing in the world, to be honest.
right. Yeah, I think that's like the
Yeah,
best part of being an author is, yeah, you may not like have this huge audience, but just a few readers that just really resonate with your story and tell you that they loved it and it was what they needed just makes your
that makes it
day. It
literally
makes it
all
all
worth
worth.
it.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it all worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then speaking of the hard parts, right? That's kind of what keeps you going through it. I don't know. The hardest part with this book probably was that rewriting so many times, trying to
Yeah.
figure out what the story was that I was trying to tell. Um, yeah, I don't know. Writing comes so naturally to me that most of it is not that difficult. I feel like that's a weird thing to say. There are certain challenges, of course, but
Yeah.
nothing that's too painful, I don't think, for me to work through.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you mentioned that because it's like, yeah, we can be grateful that, it took us so long to be able to finally figure out what, like, where the book is supposed to be. But it's a tiring process to go through and
It can be,
it can be a
oh,
little hard.
actually, I'm going to change my answer. I know what
Okay.
the hardest part was for me.
Okay.
So, I have this very innate fear of being perceived and being seen, which very
Oh.
much does not go hand in hand with being a published author.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of us feel that way though, right? Because so
Yeah.
many of us are more introverted and more shy. And it's not like back like when we were kids where you just walk into a bookstore and find a book and you don't know anything about the author. You can't contact them, anything,
Right.
right? We have to be online and we have to be not like a celebrity, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like we have to be
Yeah.
kind of a public facing person, which is very unnatural for a lot of us. That was the hardest thing about Under Darkened Skies. It was the first book I was ever publishing, and I was so scared that I felt like sick in the weeks leading up to publication,
Oh.
like physically sick. Um, but I got through it and like my therapist had helped me prepare for this moment and everything went fine.
Yeah.
And every book since then has gotten a lot easier. I mean, it's still always like, oh my gosh, I'm putting a book out in the world. But that initial like bump of, oh, I'm going to be perceived by a lot of people was the hardest part for me.
Yeah, yeah, it's very
Yeah.
daunting. And to think like I'm going to get
Yeah.
reviews and people are going to make
Yeah.
assumptions about me based on what I've written and it can
Right.
be
But like I just remember, my story is my story and what people read with their own lens, right, is not something I could ever predict because I don't know every individual reader. I only know what I'm trying to do, and everyone's going to bring their own lens to the story,
right.
uh, which helps some. But then you're still like, oh my gosh, people are reading it and judging it.
It's definitely like trying to find like trying to have that more positive mindset. But yeah, it's hard when
Yeah.
you're naturally introverted and like
Yeah,
it's natural to have a little bit of fear like that, I think.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've gotten so much advice from you in this interview, but let's get some more advice.
Oh
what is
gosh.
what's one what is one piece of advice you give to a writer and one piece of advice you give to an author?
Oh gosh. Outside of what I've already said too,
It's okay if you want to repeat advice.
that's tough. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if I have any other apparent wisdom to instill in anyone. Um, okay, so I think going back to like my experience of having to rewrite Under Darkened Skies so many times, right? If you like to all the writers, even all the authors out there, if there's something about your story that just feels like it's not working for some reason, it's okay to pull back, even if you're in the middle of a draft and sit and think, what is not resonating here with me? Because if it doesn't resonate with you, it's not going to resonate with your audience. I don't think anyway.
Yeah.
And then to anyone who's gearing up to publish or is trying to do that soon, I would say definitely have like a support system in place, right? Even if you're not physically shaking with fear, like I was, it's still really good if you have, friends, family, partner, therapist, who can support you as you start that journey because it's a really big step to take. Um, and you should have support and you should be able to take a break and do all that. Take care of yourself.
I totally agree. I love that advice. All right, let's get into
You nailed it.
some let's get into some rapid fire questions now. So this the
Okay.
fun. I think this is the fun part of the interview, if I say
Okay.
so myself. What is your favorite trope?
Only one bed.
Oh,
Or
okay.
only one anything.
Yeah,
I
one
have only one
horse.
bed and only one motorcycle in Under Darkened
Oh
Skies.
yeah,
So
one
there you go.
motorcycle. Love that.
Yeah,
Just the tension and it's great.
exactly.
What is your favorite writing beverage or snack?
Oh gosh. If I'm writing in the morning, it's definitely my coffee. But if I'm writing at night, which is usually when I am doing most of my creative work, decaf breakfast tea is the way to go.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
And then what is your favorite book currently?
Oh, that's hard. Know that I have a favorite, but my most recent five-star read was The Prince of Tirana by my friend actually, Haley Turner.
Okay.
It was very good. If you love like Tamora Pierce, Graceling, anything like that, highly recommend. It's like an adult version of that.
Oh,
Very
okay.
nostalgic. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. And then
Yeah.
what are you working on right now?
Ooh, okay. So at the time of recording this, the final book in the Darkened Sky series is waiting for revisions. I'm waiting for beta feedback, and then I'll start back on that. But I started working on my next series. It's going to be a trilogy, I think, hopefully. It's going to be like a space romantasy
Ooh,
series. Yeah,
how
I cannot stick to a
fun.
classic fantasy setting. I always have to do something different, but
Yeah. I feel like
yeah,
it's the
like
different ones that catch our attention, I believe.
that's the hope.
Yeah.
I gotta just follow my muse.
Yes, definitely. And then
Yeah.
also, by the time this episode is released, what is
Yes.
it? The next book in the series
Yes,
is be out?
the fourth book in the Darkened Sky series,
Right.
Beyond Veiled Destinies, comes out June 24th. Very excited for that. It's a roller coaster. I'm gonna take you very high and then I'm gonna take you very low
Oh boy.
throughout the book. So prepare yourselves.
Yes, definitely. We'll prepare ourselves. So that's super exciting. And then where can readers find you?
So I am at HE Bauman. That's Bauman. Um, Anywhere on social media. I'm mostly on Instagram, but I do also dabble on TikTok and Threads and Pinterest even. And then my website is hebauman.com. It's pretty straightforward.
Awesome. And we'll have the links to all that in the show notes. And if you're on YouTube, it'll be in the description below. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. I had such a
Yeah,
blast
thank you for
talking to
having
you.
me.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
learning
this is
all the
great.
things. You have so much advice, and I'm going to apply them into my life. So it's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Of course.